Today we're going to be learning the Sideswipe. I'm really excited to teach this one. I've struggled with this trick for a really long time, and it was mainly down to my approach rather than a lack of flexibility or a lack of power or anything like that. Even after getting really good at raise and 540 kick, I still found this trick hard. But I was caught in a bad mindset that a lot of people get into. Maybe you've gotten into this mindset with some of your own tricks. Rather than me seeing myself on a low rung of a ladder to an incredible Sideswipe, I just thought I was doing it completely wrong and I needed to relearn it. People kept telling me that it needs to be a raised swipe, otherwise it's just going to be a laid back 540 kick. So I tried to swipe out of my raise, and it really didn't work. I now understand that that's because of the specific kind of raise I was doing. It didn't lend itself to a Sideswipe. I also understand that the type of Sideswipe I wanted could have easily been learned using what I already had. I could have worked with what I was comfortable with and progressed it into the kind of Sideswipe that I'd want. I just wasn't aware of the steps. So today, I'm going to share those steps with you. I'm going to teach you how to turn your 540 kick into a Sideswipe. You don't even need to be able to do a raise for this tutorial. You just need to have a solid 540 kick and you can start working towards your Sideswipe. Make sure your base 540 kick has a chamber and a round kick across your target. That's going to make it much easier to Sideswipe, as you're going to be used to turning over your hips to your landing. If you think about this as an inside crescent, it's going to be much harder, as when the crescent comes out, your hips aren't as far around. You've still got to turn all the way to that landing position rather than just swiping down to the ground. So using 540 kick as a base, let's get into progression 1. What's the first thing you're going to do? Our first change is going to be with the leg that you drive upwards in your takeoff. Rather than driving up a bent knee, I want you to try and drive up a straight leg. It's not a huge change, and some of you might already do this in your 540 kick. If you do, great, it's just going to make this much easier to learn. On to progression 2. In this progression, we're going to be changing your spotting. So make sure you see your target just like you would for a 540 kick after you take off, and then once you're in the air, about to kick that target, try to look over your shoulder at the ground. You want to keep that spot on the ground over your shoulder right up until you land. Make sure you're still taking off with a straight leg. We're just going to keep adding on little bits to make your Sideswipe. It will probably look like you're doing a janky 540 kick at the moment, but don't fall into the same trap I did. You're on the path to getting a decent Sideswipe. For progression 3, we're going to add in another spot. As you step over onto your leg, try to look in front of you in the direction you're traveling, but slightly off to the side.
I spot here, I start to open up my hips. I don't want to look this way. My vision's just going to turn, and I'm going to still spot the floor. I'm just kind of turning my vision to be upside down for the Sideswipe.
He says to spot straight in front of you, and he's amazing at it. So surely that's the right way to go, right? Well, it really depends on your flexibility level. If you have really open hips, then you can spot straight in front of you and open your hips and get your leg high behind you. But if your hips aren't quite as open, which is probably the situation you're in, as most people are in this situation, very few people are flexible enough to do it like this. A good way to gauge it is think about how good you are at Gumby. If Gumby comes really naturally and easy to you, then you're probably flexible enough to be spotting straight in front. If it doesn't, you're probably going to do better spotting slightly to the side. If I spot straight forwards, my leg can come up and turn outwards to about there. Whereas if I allow my spot to go more to the side and my chest to move more towards the side, you'll see my hip starts to open more. The leg starts to get higher. So you want to find the right spot for you. It's going to depend on your hip flexibility level. A good way to check this is to see how far around you need to spot in order to have your hips and chest facing that way. So if I step to here, then I'm able to fully open my hips, get my leg up to about there, while still maintaining that spot. Whereas if I'm straight on, I can't turn my head and chest enough. And that's why my side swipe feels much easier when I have that spot off to the side. Make sure that spot's quite far out in front of you. Don't look straight down at the ground, otherwise that's going to cause your back to round and that's not going to be good for it. And you don't need to look at that spot for too long. As soon as your leg starts to swing round and you feel yourself turning, change your spot to look at your target, just like you would in a 540 kick. And then once you're in the air, you're going to look over your shoulder again. That last spot should be in pretty much the same place as your first spot was. This should start to look a bit more like a side swipe. For progression 4, we're going to change your arm motion. In a 540 kick, you swing your arms straight across your body. In a side swipe, we want to flip a bit more. So rather than swinging your arms across and wrapping them in, try to swing your arms more forwards. Now, you don't need to swing straight over the top. That's just going to confuse things and it's going to make it hard for you to get this progression down. So I recommend swinging your arms at a diagonal, focusing primarily on that second arm swinging diagonally downwards and wrapping in. That arm's going to help you to open up your hips and invert. When you do this, make sure you use the same 3 spots that you've been using. And on to progression 5. This is what's going to make your side swipe have a really nice back arch in it. Once you step over and look at your first spot, try to lift your chin and keep looking at that spot all the way through your takeoff. Try to look at this spot for as long as you can. If you lose it, that's okay. Just try and see that spot again as soon as you take off. We're just taking out that middle 540 kick spot. We don't need it anymore. You should have awareness in the movement from the previous progressions, so you should be able to just feel this one out. The more you practice it, the easier it's going to get for you to keep the same spot all the way through the takeoff, right to the kick. As soon as you leave the ground, try to crunch in, engage your core. If you stay in this arch position for too long, then your side swipe's going to be kind of slow and sluggish. It will feel a little bit awkward. Make sure you just arch in your takeoff and then try and crunch in as you kick as soon as you possibly can. And that's it, you should have yourself a side swipe. There's no need to overthink this move. That's something that I did a lot of in the past. I was thinking so much about having straight arms, swinging forwards and spotting straight forwards with my chin up and all of that it just made it much harder for me. There's no need to overthink this. Just try to work through all of these progressions. Don't overthink, still think about doing a 540 kick just with these changes made to it, and you'll get yourself a side swipe. From there, you can start to work on some of the finer details to make it into a really nice side swipe. To understand why it's so important to build awareness, think about doing a gainer off the other leg. It's probably gonna be super awkward. Why is that? You've got enough power to do it, you understand the technique enough, it's because you don't have awareness. Just like thinking really in depth about the technique for your dark side gainer isn't going to make it feel natural, thinking really in depth about your side swipe isn't going to make it natural. You just need to drill these progressions to get that awareness. But once you've got that awareness, you want to make it nice, you want to make it tasty. Let's break down the technique and some of the common mistakes that you need to avoid. When you step over onto your leg, make sure your chest isn't too low. If your chest is really low down as you step, it doesn't have any space to travel. You want to allow your chest to lean forwards as your leg drives upwards. If the chest is already forwards when you step, it's got nowhere to go and you're not going to be able to build any flipping momentum. It's likely to make your side swipe really low and awkward like this. So make sure as you step, you're in a fairly upright position, just like you would be in a 540 kick. I mentioned this one earlier, this is another one I've had problems with. You don't want to arch for too long. If you're able to maintain that spot all the way through your takeoff, you've done enough arching. As soon as you leave the ground, you've got to think about engaging your core and squeezing in to get that leg kicking round. Make sure your second swinging arm wraps in your takeoff. This mistake is a huge part of why I couldn't turn my raise into a side swipe. In my raise, I don't wrap in that arm straight away. This allows me to keep my head and chest facing forwards for longer. This isn't something that I want to do. I'm working on changing this, as it's much better to get your inversion in your raise from back arch, allowing your head to go to the side, rather than trying to treat it as so much of a flip. But that's a whole nother deep dive video. Just try and pull in that arm straight away. It's going to allow you to open up your hips in the takeoff. If that arm doesn't wrap in, then your hips are going to be really squared. So you're going to struggle to get yourself in a good position to kick. To control how high or low you go, think about where your chest is in the takeoff. If you lean forwards after you step, then you're going to travel more and you're going to stay lower to the ground. You're also going to have a faster flip, as the lower you are, the less distance your legs need to travel, so the faster your flip's going to be. If you're using a side swipe to gain momentum into another trick, then you're going to want to lean forwards and do one of these low, fast side swipes. If you're doing it by itself, and you want to variate it or just do it as high and impressively as possible, then don't lean forwards at all. Try and maintain that spot, but keep your chest fairly upright. This means you'll flip around a higher point, you'll travel less, it's just going to be a bigger movement. Don't bend the leg that you drive upwards too soon. This is something I'm still working on. I'm still not perfect at this trick. I used to think that this was really important. Turns out it's not that important. I think it does help, but you can do a decent side swipe bending your leg early. It's just something to work on over time. Film yourself, see how long you're keeping that leg straight for. Ideally, you want it to be straight until you extend the other leg, and then it chambers in as you swipe downwards. This next tip is something that makes a huge difference for getting the most out of your body. I thought my raise and side swipe didn't have that much back arch, just because my back couldn't arch that much. And that's half true, but actually I could have gotten way more arch out of my back through changing my technique. Allow the first arm that swings to keep swinging over your head after you leave the ground. Now you can do this with a straight arm, like you're reaching for a touchdown raise, or you can do this with your elbow. I prefer to do it with my elbow as it feels a bit more natural and I like the look of it. You'll notice that Eduardo does this really hard in all of his raise and side swipe tricks. Now the more you arch your back, the more acceleration you're going to get when you crunch in again. So this one's pretty huge. Keep swinging that arm after you leave the ground. It will make you flip more and it will make you flip faster. The more over the top you swing your arms, the more you're gonna flip. If you want to go more off axis, swing your arms at more of a diagonal. Another really important tip, you may have noticed I haven't talked about the step too much. That's because I want you to keep this natural. I don't want you to be overthinking your step when you're trying to change your 540 kick. Just do what you're comfortable with to start with. But once you've done this for a while, you might want to start cleaning this up and making it more efficient. How you place your foot is largely going to be dependent on your hip flexibility. If you have incredibly open hips, then you can step onto your foot pointing towards the direction you're traveling. I say that you need really open hips for this, as you want to still be able to turn your hips 90 to 180 degrees away from the direction you're traveling. That's going to be incredibly hard if your foot's facing completely forwards. You'll notice the only people that can successfully do this are people who are really good at gumbies, people who have very open hips. Most people should step somewhere between 45 and 90 degrees away from the direction they're traveling. This is going to feel more comfortable and you're going to be able to open up your hips enough in the takeoff for it to be a nice functional side swipe. I step at around 90 degrees, feels very natural for me, so do what you will with it, experiment, find out what foot positioning works best for you. But how you do the actual step itself is really important. The higher you lift your leg as you step, the more power you're going to lose. So try to make this step really low and fast. Also, you don't want to think about stepping onto that foot and then lifting up the other foot. Think of it as a repositioning of your weight. There should be a moment where both feet are either off the ground or just gliding on the ground, barely touching the ground, so there's no weight on your feet. That means as soon as that foot comes down and pushes into the ground, the other one's already swinging backwards. You don't want to step and then swing. You want to step and swing at the same time. That's going to accelerate you around as fast as possible. Those are my main tech tips. I recommend you check out Vios's Sideswipe deep dive if you want a different perspective and some more depth on other areas of the Sideswipe. I also recommend you check out my critical eye video if you want to see some of these things in action with some of the best Sideswipes in the world. One thing I want you to take home from this video is not to make the mistake I made with this trick. With any of your tricks, I see it a lot. I see people asking for help with stuff like touchdown raise and raise, saying, I just can't do it, I'm finding touchdown raise really hard, when actually, they're on the path to getting a really good touchdown raise. They're just comparing themselves to people who've been doing it for 5 or 10 years. Don't look at the very best Sideswipe in the world and then look at yours and think you're doing it all wrong. You're just performing an earlier iteration of that amazing Sideswipe. So don't be disheartened if you're just doing a leant back 540 kick. That is helping you get to your Sideswipe. You just need to be aware of what needs to be changed to get you there. Hopefully this video has done just that for you. If you are feeling that way about any other trick, if we don't have a tutorial on it, then hit us up, suggest it, and we'll try and get one. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.